And we've helped quite a few hams figure out things. And little background on Node-RED, Andreas, N6NU, first started playing with this about 5-6 years ago. He wanted to have a way of having a graphical interface to control his step-IR antenna, and started playing around with this. And Node-RED is a graphical programming environment written by IBM, and it's made primarily to connect Internet of Things devices, IoT devices. So we've adapted it in the ham community. Andreas got Mike involved with it, and Andreas and Mike got me involved, and Andy up in Connecticut, I mean in Canada, BA7CW, and it's kind of taken off. So pretty much almost anything with a serial USB or network connection, we can interface to, whether it's ICOM radios, Kenwoods. Primarily what I've been working with is flex radios and rotor control amplifiers, power switches to control stuff in the shack, all kinds of good stuff. Interfacing to different logbooks, being able to take the ADIF file out of WSJTX, inject data into the ADIF, and then send it off to MacLogger DX and Ham Radio Deluxe. That's a few of the things we've been working on. Watt meter integration, antenna tuner integration. So it's really come a long way, and there's a lot of interest. The ARRL has shown interest in using and leveraging Node-RED in doing some updates to their stations in Connecticut. And so this has really got a lot of traction with a lot of people. So before we get started, any questions? All right. So again, what I've done is taken a Raspberry Pi 4B 4 gigabyte model, and I've loaded up Node-RED. I loaded the 64-bit version, but 32-bit works just as well. And so right now, when you first start Node-RED, you just put in, the IP address of the Node-RED Raspberry Pi, or if you're running it on a PC. And with the latest Node-RED, you have the ability to create projects where you can have different, projects. You can open up a project that would have certain flows. You could have a workspace for anything that you're experimenting with. If you want to take somebody's working flow and then have it working, and then have another project that you can open up that would then load in a test flow that you can go and start changing things and learn how everything works and how to massage data and change it to your specific needs. So right now, I'm not going to do that. So I'm starting with a blank slate. So when you first start it, it's the IP address of the node, and then :1880. 1880 is the default port. There is a way to change that. If we get into a little bit more of the customization, we can cover that in another session at a later date. So it's the IP address :1880, and you'll get a default editor screen that you see in front of us. And I'll bring this up to full screen. And so the first thing you want to do is, in my folder on the groups.io group under my call sign, there's a readme.txt file. And that readme.txt file has, I'm going to move this out of the way here so I can get to it. I got two monitors here, so you're only seeing one. But the readme.txt file kind of gives you some information about the flows. And if any of the folders on the site have a readme.txt file, I encourage you to read it. When we get into the actual flows, I'll comment. There's what they call comment nodes, which are in white. And you click on those, and there's information in there that helps you get things running. So in here in the readme.txt, these are nodes that need to be loaded in order to work with the flows that I have posted up online. And as I add more flows that require specific custom nodes, I'll add more information into this readme.txt file. So on the left here, you have these, this is your, what they call pallet on the left. And with the pallet, what you have is these nodes. And a node can do different functions. So if I hover over the inject node, it injects a message into a flow, either manually or at regular intervals. And so you can sit there and you can drag this in. You can then open it up. And if you click on it, it's going to inject a timestamp. So just to go over some real basics, the one that you're going to use the most when you're playing with stuff and customizing it and trying to build your own flows is the debug node. So I just dragged in the debug, and in the upper right, there's a little bug icon. If I click that,
I did it wrong.
now you can see the debug messages. Now, what you do is you connect between the timestamp and the debug. You just left click and then drag it over and you connect it. And in order for it to go and get where it's live, you got to hit deploy. Now, every time I click on the timestamp, it's going to inject the time, and you're going to see the time over here. And the timestamp is, I forget what the, there you go. If you click it, if you just click it, it's different formats. But you'll see that every time I inject it now, it's going to inject the time. Or you can go in here and you can say, inject once after once after a time interval, and then at an interval of, say, every 1 second. I can hit done. I can hit deploy. And now what it'll do is every second, it's going to inject the time. Now, what you can do to stop the debug, on the right of the debug, this little window, if you click it, it will
Hey, Dave,
stop
you'll
the
have
debug.
to mute.
Okay, everybody. Okay.
I think it's Edward Dowdy, maybe.
Yeah, that's right.
Sorry about
I'm
that.
just going to see. Let me see if I can. Yeah, if everybody could just mute their microphones, it'd probably be easier. All right, that sounds good now. All right, sorry about that. So on the right of the debug node, this little window here, when it's out, you're going to be able to see debug messages from it. And then to stop the debug messages, you just click it to close it. And in the debug window on the right here, there's a little garbage can, and that will clear the debug window. So that's just a quick and easy on how to, a timestamp node, debug node, and then, so anything that you're doing in Node-RED, and when we get into loading some of these flows that I've already created, I'll go through and we'll put in the debug node and show you the different payloads. Payload is the message that gets from one node to the next node. So you could have, for example, on the Pallet here, one of the things is you have a UDP in node. And the UDP in node, I could sit there and say, okay, I want to listen to port 4992, which is what Flex broadcasts out on with the broadcast packets. So when your radio is on and on the network, whether a client is connected, whether Smart SDR or Maestro or anything's connected, it's broadcasting these packets on the network to say, hey, here I am, I'm here. This is, my broadcast packet. So I'm going to go ahead and set up this UDP in node on 4992. My radio's on right now. And I'm going to sit there and take a debug node, and we're going to drag this over, and we're going to connect it. And what you're going to do is deploy it to make it live. And now you're going to see the messages coming up. Now I'm going to stop it so it doesn't scroll off screen. And what I'm going to do now is it's set up as a buffer. If I go and click where it says raw, it comes up as a string. And here's the broadcast packet that comes over. And if you look at it, it's a discovery protocol, and it has the model equals Flex 6600M, the serial number of the radio, the version of the software. You don't see that, by the way. Right, Mike?
Oh,
anyway, yeah. Nickname of the radio, Sexy Flexy, my call sign, IP address of the radio, port number that's broadcast packets on, and then pretty much in use IP. Right now, there's none. There's no client connected. The host name, maximum license version, the radio license ID. So there's a bunch of information in here.
Right, Dave. That could also be a serial port coming from your Kenwood 850, right?
Right. So exactly. So if you have a Kenwood 850 or an ICOM Kenwood 850, or let's take a more modern Kenwood TS2000 has a COM port on it. You can have, instead of UDP in, we can use down here. There's a serial. We really recommend to use a serial request node versus the in and out, there is a serial in and a serial out node. So you would have in from the radio and out to the radio, but timing issues, it's better to use the serial request, which has the in and out. And if you click it, you can go in here and you can see this is the port that it's on, and you could change this to the serial port if you have more than one serial USB adapter attached to the Raspberry Pi. You can change that information here. If you click on the little pencil, you can then change your baud rate, your parity, DTR, RTS, anything you need to change, the polling rate of how quick it polls, and so that's where you set up in a serial port. If it was
I'll just throw in that, as Dave points out, on serial ports, I've got an Alpha 87A tied in on a serial port on the Pi.
Yep. And then
amazing.
Yeah, and like say an ICOM 7610, it has a USB connection. Again, you could use the serial port because the data coming in is treated as if it's a virtual serial connection, but it could be dev TTY USB 0, for example, if it's the only USB connection to the Pi. So, it's not limited to just Flex with a UDP and a TCP port. So we'll get into this in a little bit more detail when we start loading some of these flows and stuff. I just wanted to show, the real basics of getting started. Is the first thing to do is get this discovery information from the radio, and that's would be really the basic building block for developing the flows.
Steppers, things like that.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do now is the first thing is, as I said, is in this text file, I have different nodes here that I say need to be loaded. Now, what I've done is I actually have loaded everything except for these two, the two UIs and the string node. Those three I did not load yet. So if you need to load a node, for example, let's say this is the node here, and you don't know the whole, let me rephrase this. You could take this name, we can hit copy, and in order to add a node to Node-RED, you got to go into Manage Pallet. So up in the upper right, there's this little 3 horizontal lines. They call it the hamburger icon. I don't know who called it that, but you click on that, and then you go into Manage Pallet. And this is where you can add on the left side when you see all the different nodes. This is where you can add them. So you click on Install, and excuse me. And in install, you would then put in the name of the one that you want to load, UI LED, and let me go back here. It disappeared. Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped a step. Bad me, right? And then what you're going to do is you're just going to hit enter, and it's going to search for it. And there's a UI LED and a UI LED fork. We don't want the fork. We just want the one that has the name that matches UI LED. You click install. You click install, and it will install the node. And what I'm going to do is I'm not going to install the string node, and I'll show you why. When you load a flow, if it's missing a node, I'll show you the error that will come up. So the other one we wanted to do is UI level for now, and we want to install this one as well.
Well, Dave's doing that. A Pallet is a program, like an add-on feature or program that somebody else has written, right? At Pallet, or you use a Pallet manager to go get it, like adding a program in Linux.
It's like an artist has an easel with the different color paints. That would be your palette. There's kind of good analogy on that.
Plugin would be another analogy.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Exactly. So, and they have these nodes that do all kinds of different things, and it's pretty cool. And so we're going to sit here and start with our blank slate again. And, each one of these, if you hover over it, it kind of gives you a little description. Split can split a message into a sequence of messages. So let's say you had I'll show you this when we get into into loading the flows. I'll actually use a debug node, and you can see what the payload looks like before a split and what it looks like after. And
Dave, you may want to explain message.payload.
Yes. Yeah, message.payload is the default name for the information that gets transferred from one node to the next node. So what would come in on the UDP in would be sent out as message.payload. And then the next node, the debug node, is looking for message.payload and then puts that into the debug window on the right. So now we've loaded in our nodes, except for the one, as I said, because I want to show you the error. And we're ready to start installing flows. Now, there's plenty of flows that are already built that are on the Groups.io site. If you go through there, you see my call sign WO2X. I'm going to be updating the Vita49 flow and the Flex Radio flow. Those two will be getting updated tonight. And I named them Vita49 version 5 and Flex Radio version 5. And to make things easier tonight, I have all my flows here that I can load in to make it easier. So you've gone ahead, you got to the site, and you found the flow that you want to load, the Vita49. This is what gets the information from the radio in those broadcast packets. And how do you load it? There's two ways. Again, you go to the right to the little horizontal 3 lines. You go to import. There's two ways to import it. One is to select a file to import, or you can take the contents of a file and paste it in this window and then import it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up, just to show you, I'm going to open up the Vita49 flow, and I'm going to just do Control A. I'm going to copy it, and we're going to just paste it in here. And then I'm going to do import, and we're going to import to, and even if I select current flow, I always do new flow. I always just get in the habit. You want it to go into another, it's going to create another tab on top when I import it. So I'm going to hit import, and I'm going to hit import copy. And it says imported 1 flow and 23 nodes. So these nodes that are on the left, there's going to be 23 nodes that it imported. And so if I go to Vita49, here is what got imported. I'm going to hit deploy. Now, one of the nodes that I imported, it's very important, is the one that's called Node-RED dashboard. Without the dashboard, you're not going to see what you're building. You're not going to see the outcome of it. You're not going to see what you're looking for. So in order to access the dashboard, it's the IP address of the node, :1880/UI, user interface. And when you hit that, what's going to happen is it's going to come up. These other groups that are created, I didn't wipe them out from Node-RED. If I go into dashboard configuration, which we're going to cover, you'll see that they were still there. So just for right now, disregard them. If you're working with a brand new installation, you would have a Flex Radio group, and then it's going to have 4 things that, if you go back here, these blue nodes is a text node. So it's going to take it's going to get the model number from the, if I take the debug here, and I connect it into the raw Vita49 information, which is coming in on port 4992. And then I sit there and I connect it to the model, to the output of where it says parse model. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the first one on. I'm going to hit deploy. And this is the raw data coming in now from the 4992 broadcast packet, same that I showed you before. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop it. I'm going to clear out the debug, and I'm going to turn on the second one. And what I'm parsing out now, it says model equals Flex 6600M. And so that's what's coming out now under message payload. So we can walk through real quick. The first node that I'm using is a split node. And what the split node is doing is it's saying, okay, it's going to split this information from the raw. Turn this back on again here. So this information here is going to split it where it says, where it has model equals 6600M, and then there's this gap here, and serial equals the serial number, version equals, it's going to split it. So each one of those is a different piece coming out. We'll just do this to be easier to watch as we go through this. And
so you see what he did there? He actually deleted the line That's the
Yeah, I
wiring
the line
between
and
the
I
nodes.
reconnected it to the output of the split. Now, if I stop it, you'll see that coming out now, each one of those pieces of information is on a separate separate packet coming out, or a separate, I should say, a separate payload coming out. So it's sending these, it split the payload, and I have all these separate payloads coming out. So now what I've done is I've gone in and used a, what they call switch node, and it says, if Matches RegEx, which is similar to, does it contain this? Does it contain caret version equals? And, you know, if it contains version equals, it's going to send it out the output. So that's going to be the version. So it's going to send it out the software version. So, and then same thing with model. If it contains model equals, you know, caret model equals, it's going to send it out for the model. Call sign, in-use IP, client name. So for model, it's going to say if it has caret model equals, it's going to send it into this next node. Now the function node is where you can actually, if you're good with JavaScript and Node.js, you can actually get really creative with a lot of stuff. And so the first thing I'm doing, and it again, for this beginner's session here, it probably is a lot more than we really should be covering tonight. But what I've done in a nutshell is I took this message.model, it equals message payload split, and I split it on the dash. So if model equals 6600, model equals, and it says flex dash 6600M, I'm only concerned with the 6600M. I don't care about flex. I don't care about model. So I split it on that dash character, and then the number one tells me I want the second half of it. Not the, 0 would be the first half, 1 would be the second half. And then I'm just for my way I did a message m equals message model, and then I did message m, and then I only wanted the first 4 characters, whether it's 6600, 6300, 6400, 6500, 6700. So I don't care if it's an M or a non-M model. I just want to know what model I'm dealing with. And we'll get into that if when we get into a little bit of it deeper. So really what I did here, and the reason I did this is, and I'll explain this without going into too much detail, but for when I do the meters, that there's internal meters in the radio, you can see the voltage of that's at the back of the radio. You can see the voltage that's at the PA in the radio. If it's a 64 or 6600, you can see the fan speed. There is no fan speed meter in the 63, 65, or 6700. And then the other one is the PA temperature. And there's like 22 different meters in the radio. And you can actually get a list of them. And I'm not going to put a file together with the list of the various meters in the radio. But so really the ones that I was concerned with was the voltage into the radio, the voltage at the PA, the temperature of the radio, and then the fan speed. So now in the 6300, since there is no fan speed, and if the software version, and this is for upcoming software release, so with the 3.1.12, it's going to say, okay, the voltage in is meter 16, the voltage at the PA is meter 15, and the temperature is meter 20. But if it's a 6600, it's going to say, because it has that fan speed that's in between, the temperature meter gets shifted by 1. So all this math does is it looks at the model number, it looks at the software in the version, and then it sets the meter numbers appropriately. So you see the proper meters when you put the meters on the dashboard. So again, more detail than I really want to cover tonight, but just to explain what we're doing. So it comes into the function node. It does kinds of math and stripping, parsing. What parsing means is you have a big length of data that comes in, and you want to be able to take a specific piece of that data. For example, model equals flex dash 6600M. I only want 6600. I don't care about the rest. So that's why I go in and I use this math to be able to split off and parse the model number, and then it feeds out. So if I go to the next step over here on the output, it's going to feed out over here the model number that I'm interested in. And actually, it says model equals flex 6600M. And the reason why is I've changed the model name, where it's message.model instead of message.payload. Again, a little more detail. This is a little bit more advanced, but I would have to go into here, message.payload, and if I change this to message.model, and again, I don't want to get you guys too confused tonight, but just to show you that this is what's actually being handed out to this text node, and what we would have, if I deploy it, is it'll come up and show model number of the radio. And it's going to make a liar out of me. Oh, there it goes. Still showing Flex Radio 6600. And the reason being is, I think I did. Yeah, what I did here is message model equals, and I put in the Flex Radio name and then the model number. So you can do that. You can add to the payload and then add the actual payload to it. And that's exactly what I did here. That's why it's showing Flex Radio 6600M.
This is Tom, NY4I. Can I add one thing, if I may, or just one observation?
Yeah, Tom.
So just in case some people,
go ahead. Go ahead.
Just in case some beginners' eyes are glazing over, the nice thing about this is all the
pretty much already
everything that's already built. Yeah, you can just import these things and kind of use them and then learn from them. And
right,
but you don't have to go code every. Nice thing is you don't have to go code any of this from scratch.
Yeah.
So
I'm gonna start kind of getting more into getting the stuff loaded and being able to get into where people can get the dashboard and just move things around on the dashboard to their liking, because that's really what the intent is. So I really didn't want to get involved with this too deep, but I just want to show you that what you can do with this. So enough about that. So these text nodes are what actually gets assigned and out to your dashboard. So on the dashboard, you would have here the radio and also the client. And again, if I hit the radio to operate right now and run it, it should connect up, and then you'll see the client name come up in client IP. Again, this is already done, and there's nothing that you need to do. The only thing coming back into here, if you read the, remember I mentioned comment nodes. So there's a comment node here, and in here, I sat there and put in a little note here. And what you need to do is this ping node, which is right here, is you just got to go into here and set the IP address to your radio. Whatever your radio's IP address is on your network, you would put that in here. And that needs to be installed. And then again, when the radio comes up, the radio says the client, I'm running the 6600M front panel, and this is the IP address of the client, not the radio. So if somebody was connected remotely, you would see the IP address of the client remotely. So that's the Vita 49 flow. And again, the Flex Radio flow that we're going to load next is, needs this flow. These two go together because the Vita 49 takes information here and it sends it off to the Flex Radio flow. So these two work hand in hand. And so in order, what we're going to do is we're going to import. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select the file rather than cut and paste. And I'm going to go to downloads. And we're going to go to the Flex Radio flow. And we're going to go to new flow, import. And notice the red improper unrecognized, import unrecognized type string. If you go to import somebody's flow and you forgot to install the node that it needs, it's going to come up and give you an error. And when you look at it, the string node that's missing, it's going to say unknown, and it's going to have the name of the node. And it's right down here with the dashed line around it. So before I deploy it, I'm going to go into my manage palette. I'm going to go install string, and it's node red contrib string. And that was what was in the text file down the bottom here. So I'm going to go ahead and install this. I just wanted to show what the error would be if you loaded a flow and it's missing a specific node. So that comes up in green. It closed. And if you notice, the string node now doesn't have the dashed line around it. So we're going to hit deploy. And now if we go back to our dashboard, I had set up my dashboard that I have more information that comes up. And again, these different things here, the PA voltage, input voltage, fan speed, PA temperature, the power, mode of the radio, sideband, lower sideband, CW, transmit status, that all comes up on the dashboard. The meters are over to the right here. You can see them. And I don't know why I'm not getting the information from the radio. Oh, hold on a second. Cancel. All right, I screwed something up. Anyway, it's probably because I loaded the Flex radio flow after I started the radio. So let me disconnect the client, reconnect it. But
just reinitialize it.
Did you have to set your IPs or anything since you imported this from
again, if you go into Flex radio flow, you notice there's several comment nodes, these white nodes. The one up on top is the most important. It tells you got to change the IP address, which is right here in the TCP node. This is the one that you have to set to the IP address of your radio. And so that's really the change you got to make for this to work. The information will come up. I'm going to rerun this now. And it should come up and you'll see it says connected to the radio here in green underneath the TCP node. All right, came up. And now it came up, yeah. If I load the node after the client is connected, it won't pick it up. I have to stop and restart it. So you would load all these nodes and everything before you start up your radio and your client. So once I did that, you notice here I have my meters, PA voltage, input voltage, fan speed, and PA temperature. And then I have the RF power, my tune power, the mode that I'm operating in, and transmit status, and the transmit VFO. So if you go back to the dashboard, that's what I have laid out here right now. My transmit VFO is on 3.636, lower sideband. My tune power is at 10 watts. RF power is set to 21 watts, and I'm in ready status. If I hit MOX on the radio, it goes to red transmitting.
Dave, do you ever leave 3636?
Yeah.
Your radio's stuck there.
I'm on 40 meters.
No, I'm kidding you.
Or
can I make a suggestion?
I run my voltage a little higher on the radio, which gives you a little cleaner IMD. Input voltage to the radio is at 14.9 on receive, 14.7 at the PA. My fan speed's running at 984 RPMs, and it's 26.3 Celsius. Little chilly in here, but anyway.
Dave, can I make a recommendation?
Yes.
I'm going to jump in just a minute. So everybody's pretty quiet. How many? Do we need to do a level set and just make sure if we lost a few people and overwhelmed you?
I still see quite a bit in here right now. I don't have an exact count. Hold on, let's see.
Let's see. So I mean, if you want Dave to back up,
I got
lots of time.
I got 34 people connected right now. I know we're kind of covering a lot, and that what we were doing with the Vita 49 flow with the math and everything. Again, this is really not what I wanted to cover tonight, but I just wanted to make sure that you could see that you could do a lot with Node-RED. But loading the flows, again, these flows are already configured. The main thing going over again on the Vita 49 is setting the ping node. You double click it, set the IP address for your radio, hit done, and then deploy. And then the only other thing you need to do is on the Flex radio flow is the TCP node here, double click it, set your IP, done, and deploy. And that's it. And it should be talking to your radio and giving you information on the dashboard.
I have a question.
So go ahead. Sorry.
I've been following along. This is KZ5 Echo Delta. I've been following along most of everything you do. How do you reset the flow? You said because you had started the flow before you started the radio, you had to go back and reset it.
No, I had started the radio. The client was connected to the radio.
Right.
In other words, Smart SD or the front panel of the radio, I started it before I loaded the Flex Radio Flow. So the Flex Radio Flow, when you do that, when you first start it, and this is a good question. How do you restart Node-RED? When you have your Pi and you have your terminal program, PuTTY, or whatever else you use, you log in with your terminal program, and from the prompt, it's node-red-stop to stop it. And to restart it, it's node-red-start.
Okay.
And it will not node equals.
I got confused because I'm not running. At one point you said you don't have to have SDR running. I don't have an M. I have a 6600, so I don't have SDR running. So that's why I'm not getting any of the information.
Right. Well, I'm saying is you would load these flows into the Raspberry Pi and deploy them. Just set your IP addresses and then hit deploy. You would do that before you start Smart SDR or the Maestro.
Yeah. Or I could just kill that Smart SDR and come back and it should work.
Exactly.
Fine, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
So the reason is I set this up, and you heard that some of the guys around the community, there was a topic coming up about popping during transmit. And, I was getting it and it drove me nuts. And I thought it was something to do with the software, with the Flex software. And it wound up being that when you have different things, different clients sending through the API, when they're sending TCP commands to the radio while the radio is transmitting, you get this little pop in the transmit audio. And we figured it out. So what I do now is with Node-RED is it only sends those commands to the radio when the radio first starts. So that's the idea of the ping node here. The ping node, when it sees the radio, it's going to say, okay, let's connect to the radio, and it connects to the radio, or it starts listening to the UDP broadcast traffic. And then once it sees a client connect, it then says, okay, and again, getting a little too deep, but it goes and it gets the client ID that's broadcasting that UDP traffic, and then it says, okay, subscribe to that client. I want to have, that, and in a world of multi-flex, you can actually have multiple clients connected at the same time. So this is designed to connect to the first client that it sees. You can change this, and again, in a later date, we can get into some more advanced stuff or do one-on-one training. But you can have Node-RED where you can have 2 Flex radio flows, one designed to connect to one client all the time and one designed to connect to another client all the time, if you wanted to.
Hey, Dave,
yeah.
If I could come back to the question about how to restart the flow. There's another method that it's a little bit less intense than restarting it from the command. But if you go to the deploy, right now it's not highlighted, but that little caret right next to it, you've got 3 different kinds of deploys you can do.
Right.
Look, the one on the bottom.
Right. Restart.
Restart all flows.
Alan's correct. In other words, instead of me going into the terminal program, PuTTY, I could have easily have done that as well. And thank you, Alan. So you could go to restart flows, and it would just restart everything again, and then you would connect your Smart SDR or Maestro or iPad, and then it would start working. So yes,
you had to bring the command line in here somehow, I guess.
Yeah.
David, I have a question too.
Yes.
This is Warren, Katie4Z. Good to meet you. I noticed that you're hardwiring the IP address for the Flex server. Can't you not just parse that off the UDP packets?
Yes,
IP
absolutely.
equals, and not have it burned in like that? So it's one less step for people to have to change.
Yes, you could probably do that, but I recommend doing one of the reasons I did this is one of the things I recommend to people when they set up their Flex on their network is to do DHCP reservation in their router so that the Flex radio always gets assigned the same IP. I don't recommend setting the radio to a static IP, because if your router ever craps out and you want to be able to use the 169.254 IP scheme to be able to connect to the radio or something, or if you bring the radio to field day and you don't have the same subnet, it won't work. So I always recommend when they go into the router, especially if you're going to set it up for a smart link, but just in the router to do a DHCP reservation. So it always gets the same IP assigned to the radio. But yes, you're correct. You can do that.
I would think it'd just make it easier for beginners who download the flows and then wonder why it's not seeing anything. And since it's, you're parsing everything else, you're parsing the model and all that, why not parse the IP address? Unless you need it before you get there.
I could parse the IP address in the Vita 49 flow, and maybe I'll update to do this, which is not the in-use IP, but the radio IP. So when you look at the data that comes in, the radio IP, I can parse that, send it to the Flex radio flow. And if you look here, if I highlight the TCP node here, and on the right, if I click on the information icon, and then over here, if I click on this icon here, show help, right here, it says, if I send message.host to this node, then it would sit there. And so what I would have to do is take that IP and then sit it, and let's say I sat there and it comes in as message.ip, and I need it to be message.host, so I can come in and it would be coming in as, it would be global to go between flows. So let's say it's global IP, and then I go to message.host. And then, so then it would, I would just have to connect this into here, and it would set the IP based on that IP, but I'd have to set up in the Vita 49 to parse the IP and then have the change node to change that message.ip to global.ip. But yeah, I'll do that. I'll modify these before I upload the flows. That's a good idea.
You should probably grab the port. You should probably grab the port. Sorry. You should probably grab the port while you're at it in case someone's
don't need it. It's always 4992.
Oh, okay. All right. So that's just a broadcast port you're working at.
UDP traffic is broadcast from the radio on 4992. That's the UDP broadcast data, just the information about the radio. And then it uses TCP 4992 for the actual TCP communications. There is another port that we use for setting the UDP for the meters and other internal, the internal meters and other, if you wanted to get pan adapter information, slice information, there is other UDP traffic, and you have to set that port. So we do in the initial, and then also right here, client UDP port, I manually set it to 4996. We were using 4991, but FRStack is using that, and so let FRStack have 4991. So I just picked 4996 because 4993 and 4 are for SmartLink, and I don't know why I didn't use 4995, but it's just an arbitrary port number that I'm setting here. But you have to set a port for the meter traffic and other UDP information from the radio, the Vita 49 information from the radio to come back in on. So we're setting that port number, and then we're listening to that port for that traffic to come back in, and then all the meter data and other stuff comes in on there. So really, you can change that port number to whatever you want, but it has to be an arbitrary port that's not in use on the computer. But yeah, setting the TCP address here, that's a good idea to be able to dynamically set it based on the Vita 49 information. So I'll make that change tonight. Good suggestion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to load in a couple of other flows, and then we'll just do that real quick, and then we'll get into the dashboard.
Dave, while you're doing that,
so far.
Yeah, well, I'll ask you and Al on this because you're better at it. If I grab the IP address of the radio, because obviously I'm going to need it later, how do I keep it around to reference it later?
Okay. So here, if you look here, right? If I turn this on if I turn it on in debug, and I grab the information here, for example,
or anything,
it has IP equals.
Yep.
But here's the problem, and this is where it gets tricky. You get IP equals and then an IP address, and then you have in-use underscore IP equals. So if I do a search for IP equals, I'm going to get 2 results coming back. So really what I need to do is take the information coming in and then be able to, and I did this trick in the Flex radio flow. And again, this is more deeper than I want to go, but
Dave, Dave, could I interrupt just for a minute?
Yeah.
I think another way, just a shorter answer to Mike's question. Mike, you asked, what do you do if you want to save something?
Like a
If
global
you look
variable.
on this flow right here, look at
Right
the
here.
lower right, open that up. That's called, he's taking the frequency and he's putting it into a global variable.
Yeah, well, this is TX status, whether it's receive or transmitting.
Right, yeah.
So
So
what he's doing is
just
he's putting it into a global variable.
Got it.
And
Now,
that
if you
global
go over
variable,
the list of
that
global
variable-
variables, go show him the list of global variables, Dave, and you'll see where that's
Where's
stored.
that at, Alan? I never use it.
The lower, all the way to the right, the down caret, it's just hidden. Yeah, you were just there, the down caret up there,
Yeah,
top right. Oh, no, top right, all the way. Yeah, right there. Click on that. And you'll get a, click on the down there. There you go.
I did. That's what pops up.
No, you still
Context
got the
data?
date button. Context data.
Yeah, that's what I was doing.
So you
Okay.
haven't collected yet. No,
Thank
you
you.
haven't.
Perfect.
And here's what I have for global variables in the flows. Fan speed, and again, these are the meter numbers. Fan speed, PA temp, voltage in, voltage PA. Those are the ones that I did up in the Vita 49 flow, and I want to be able to send those here. I want to be able to send those down to the other flow, which is the Flex 49 flow, the Flex radio flow. So those are global, meaning that they can go between different flows. If you have data in a specific flow and you want to send it from one part of the flow to the other part of the flow without leaving that flow, you can do a flow variable, which I don't have any defined here.
Okay.
Oh, meter S. I'm sorry, meter S. And
Hey,
then,
Dave? Oh, sorry.
so those are the variables that you can set. And the global variable you can use between the different flows.
Perfect.
So it
Thank
goes
you.
from one flow to the other flow without having to make a connection.
If I
And
could
don't-
just interject, it's important when you guys are studying, look at there'll be the tutorials on the type of variables. The messages flow through the nodes. They just flow from left to right, and they only exist for the moment it takes for them to flow through that node. A context variable is stored in memory. It exists in all times so that you can use it. You can call it up from within a node and use it from inside that node.
yeah, like the transmit status I had used in other nodes. So I had used that in some of the ones that I had built for some other people. So that's why I set a global variable called TX status.
Oh, this is going to make my life so much easier.
So anyway, so going forward, I'm just going to load in a couple more flows real quick, and then we'll get into the dashboard, which is where people are going to have some fun. You'll like this one. UI LED. Oh, got to do that, right? So manage palette. Says it's installed.
There's also a fork of it. I wonder what the difference is.
Yeah, I didn't use the fork one, but I'm not worried about the LED right now. It's just for on and off. But just to show you, I hit deploy, and if I go back to the dashboard, I now have my control for my KPA 1500 amp. I can power it off, and then I can power it on. It comes on, and the LED is changing, and so and I go operate standby. I can change fan speed.
I thought
And
the PGXL was noisy.
power out 10 watts of drive.
Yeah, it's a C-130 when it's at full speed. That's pretty loud.
Yeah. I brought the fans up. Yeah, you can get pretty loud, but so I wrote this to control my KPA 1500, and this is kind of what it looks like. And again, all it's doing is on the KPA 1500, it's sending commands to the amplifier. It's sending, for example, when it wants to send a status query, it's sending these commands to the amplifier, and then the amplifier replies back with the data. So, $BN is the band, $WS is the SWR, $TM, so on and so forth. FS is the fan speed, OS is it an operator standby, and so on and so forth. So, it's pretty simple when you start thinking about it. If you have the cat information or the commands that need to be sent, it's just a matter of just building it. But again, a lot of this stuff is already built to get you guys going.
Hey, Dave. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry, I apologize. I thought you were done.
No, go ahead.
Just wanted to add one thing I imagine somebody looking at this, especially if you're new to it, will go, "Hey, why do I want to do this?" And to me, the fantastic use case of it is the integration of all these different things. Certainly, I can look at my Flex, my SDR, my smart SDR, if I'm using a Flex or some other control program I'm using to control an ICOM radio or a Kenwood radio. But the fact that I have this one screen, if you will, on my web browser, that I can see my amplifier and my rotor and my antenna switches and whatnot, that's really, to me, the magic of all this is the integration, especially for remote operation. That's even better. But even in your own shack, I think being able to have one pane of glass, so to speak, and see that makes a really great interface.
Just to do this one step
you could take a tablet, by the way, and if you're a contester, you could have a tablet sitting beside you with big buttons. I want to change antennas, or I want to do this, rather than hunt and peck through your screen. It's exactly, following on what.
Watch this. This is.
I was just going to do
running
that.
on my phone. It's running on my iPhone here. So there you go. It can run on an iPhone. So get back into here again. All right. Anyway, I loaded enough flows to play around. Let me hit deploy. And any questions so far on loading nodes or loading flows? Now, if you notice this unknown UI LED, it's actually working because I saw the LED changing in the KPA 1500 flow. So what I could do is I could delete it. And then on the right, on the left of my palette, down near the bottom, here's where I have everything. And there should have been a UI LED, which isn't there. So I got to figure out why it's not there. I'll debug that. Yeah.
Could that have been a difference between UI-LED and UI_LED?
Yeah, I think I had UI_, but it still showed up though.
Right, but go back to your palettes, and was that a -LED?
If I go back into the text file, which...
Yeah, the palette is a -LED.
Right, it's -LED.
And I think the flow had it listed as _LED, so I think that's where the error was.
You've got to watch the name of those palettes pretty carefully, because there's different palettes with just slightly different names.
Oh, there's an update to it. That's why. So anyway, so we just did an update to it. I'm going to hit remove and just put it in real quick. This will install the latest version of it. All right, now it's happy. Now you have it here, the LED down at the bottom in the palette. And now all I got to do is just drop this in here and connect it back to here and hit deploy. And in the dashboard, my LED is gone. So oh, you know why? I got to tell it where to go. That's the other thing too, is when you have these either text or a meter or a LED, any of these buttons or switches, like the fan level is a switch, you have to assign them a group in the dashboard of where they're going to go. So when we get into the dashboard, I want to cover that. So I'm going to leave that not assigned yet, and then we'll go, we'll just hit deploy. Now the dashboard, as I said, in order to get to it is the IP address 1880/UI. That gets you to your dashboard. Now, how do you arrange the dashboard to make it with the way you want it to look? Up on the upper right here, what we're going to do is we're going to use that down arrow, and we're going to go to dashboard. And what's going to happen is you're going to have different groups. When you import these different flows, whatever the person who created it, it's going to come up with their group name. And you might have information that's in one group that you want in another group, or you may not want all the information. So first thing you have is a main group, which is when you go to the dashboard, you have pages. So this is like the first page. If you click on the upper left, the little hamburger icon, you can see that there's different pages. Now, I don't have FRStack loaded right now, so that's why it's coming blank. But I actually have 3 pages on my dashboard. So going back to the groups, this main group here, which is WO2X shack control, that's the first page. Radio tiles is the second. FRStack would be the third. Slices would be the fourth. And so you would have these different, those would be the pages. Now under a page, each of these KPA 1500, Flex Radio, Antenna Genius, these are groups. And then if you expand that, now you see what's in the group. So you can rearrange stuff. So right now, for example, we'll play around with the Flex Radio one. So I have model, radio call sign, and then I have the client name, the client IP address. I added a spacer, which I'll explain the spacers. To get things situated on the dashboard where you want them, you can add spacers to get the desired layout you want. So if I wanted the model to be at the bottom, I could just left click it and drag it right below LED, hit deploy. And on the dashboard now, the model number is at the bottom, radio model Flex 6600M. So you can rearrange this and drag these to wherever you want. You can even drag them into a different group. I can put it right here in the KPA 1500 group. And you can see the radio models up in the KPA 1500 group. So you can keep it simple, where you can have one group with the basic information you're looking for, or you can make it however you want. You can make it as complicated and as big as you want. And so that's, the idea is that when you go into these different things here, like say for band on the KPA 1500 flow, if I double click it, I decide which group is that going to get assigned to, and I assign it to a specific group. In this case, it's under shack control, which is the page, and then I assigned it to the KPA 1500 group.
Dave?
Yes.
This is Fred Kanan. So you kind of went through that pretty quickly. Could you do a little deeper dive into what you like groups?
Yeah. This is the stuff where you're going to, once you load flows, if you take some of these flows that are already configured, the next step is you want to get it to where you want it to, how you want it to look. So the dashboard, again, let's just go back to, let's say, the debug node. And to get to the dashboard, in the upper right, there's a little down arrow. You click that, go to dashboard. Now in the dashboard, again, there's what they call tabs and links. And under the layout tab here. So the first one, the WO2X, I'm going to collapse these. These are different pages on my dashboard. So if I go to the dashboard in the upper left, that little hamburger icon, if I click that, you'll see right now, because there's nothing assigned to those other pages, they don't show up. But you see I have the WO2X shack control, and then I have FRStack, and I have slices. Now the FRStack and the slices, I did not load that information yet. So that's why they're not showing up. But so they're pretty, you see the groups, but they're blank. I didn't load the flow yet for that. So, but under shack control, which is the main page, this is what we've loaded so far. We've loaded the power switch, the DLI switch, the flex radio, which includes the meters over here on the right. And then we also loaded the Antenna Genius and the KPA 1500. And so now back over here under the under dashboard, and then under the layout tab. So this main one here that's collapsed right now, which is WO2X shack control, that's that first page. If I expand that by clicking the little right arrow, you'll see now that there's these different groups. These are all the groups that I have on that page: KPA 1500, Flex Radio, Antenna Genius, Rotor, and then so on and so forth. And so what you can do now is under these groups is in the group is where you actually assign these buttons and text. This is a text node. So it's getting text band information as text data into this band node, and it'll put it on the dashboard as text. Temperature is a meter, and I have it set up as a bar graph meter. And when you go into here, you can actually set it up in the meter. When you set this up, there's multiple segments: green, yellow, red. So I set up the temperature with Celsius to go from minimum of 0 Celsius up to 80 degrees Celsius. And I said 0 to 35 is green, 35 to 65 is yellow, 65 to 80 would be red. So that's kind of what I did here. And it's in unit is in Celsius. You can, if the temperature happened to be Fahrenheit for your amplifier, you could put F in here. So it would be, you know, Fahrenheit instead of Celsius. So that's what I've done. And now I've named it temperature. I just named it so for reference, what meter am I dealing with right here? And
question.
Yes.
This is Andy, KU7T. I have a question about, in general, Node-RED. And I see that you imported a flow and you were able to get all the nodes. Is the user interface that you show in the dashboard, is it separated from the flow? Usually in software development, this is sort of separate, but it seems like this is all mixed together in your JSON.
When you load in here, when you go into Manage Pallet, one of the ones that you're going to install is a Node-RED dashboard, Node-RED-dashboard. So in that list of the nodes that I recommend to install is Node-RED dashboard.
And then give them the web address to the dashboard.
Yeah. So, you know, so again, these are the ones I recommend to load to work with my flows. And so Node-RED dashboard is one of them. And with that Node-RED dashboard, it will give you the ability to edit from here. When you come into here and you do the pull down, you'll be able to select dashboard and then do the configuration. And then when you put in the IP:1880/UI, you're going to get the dashboard to come up.
What
So
I meant
put
is
that address and I hit enter, it brings up the dashboard.
Dave, show them the dashboard node on the flow. So the green ones?
There is no dashboard node on the flow.
No, the green, like the band, the green one. Just so open up band on your dashboard. Yeah, right there. And then, so this is where the data actually comes out.
Yeah.
And it prints msg.payload. Is it simpler? Does that help, Andy?
So I understand the node. I understand the flow. This is basically the program. This is the data, right? And then I understand the dashboard. That's the user interface. What I don't see is here, where is the user interface? Where is that stored? Is your JSON that you shared earlier, does it have everything inside?
When you go into the flow, I'm in the KPA 1500 flow now. When I go here and I tell it, this is the group WO2X shack control, and then the subgroup is KPA 1500. So I'm actually assigning that. Normally, when you first, if I drag in, let's just do this. Be sure I didn't change anything. Okay. If I drag in a gauge and I have data that's going to come into this gauge, as a default, this one happened to pick that one, but it could come up, and it can come up either add a new UI group or it can come up as unassigned. So you have to go in here and say, where do you want that gauge to appear?
But if I
So-
import your flow, then I'll get also your user interface.
When you import my flow, what's going to happen is you're going to get my dashboard layout.
I see. Okay.
So
Andy,
if
I could
Yeah.
take a stab at it. Remember, we were talking about the pallets. Go back to the pallets, Dave.
Right.
So there's no the pallets on the editor page.
Managed pallets.
Yeah. Now, when each of those nodes are built by a developer, an independent developer, and so for the ones that display information on a dashboard, you know, like the meter, within that node, the developer has written the XML code to take the JSON and display it it creates the XML code to put it onto the website, to the web browser. And so what you're seeing on what we call the dashboard is a web browser representation of that XML code.
Wow, we're going to need a flex
Yeah,
palette.
yeah, it's getting a little deeper, so I want to kind of keep it where people can play with this, load it up, and start playing. So once you import a flow, this is where you can change things around. So when you load my KPA 1500 flow, it's going to create W02X shack control and then a subgroup called KPA 1500, and these individual dashboard icons, which is a text node, a linear bar graph temperature, text node, another bar graph, LED light, all of this information, all of these are going to, and then this is a button to select a fan level. So all of these are going to be automatically assigned into that group KPA 1500. If you want to move them, if you want to customize it and move anything and change it, this is where you would do it, where you go into where it says tabs and links. Right now, the way it's default, and when you import it, this is the look that you get here in the dashboard under KPA 1500. If I wanted to move it so that the fan speed is up right below operate and standby, you can come in here, find the fan speed and the current fan speed, and you can just drag that up right up below op standby and hit deploy. And now you notice the fan speed is now up above. So this is now, and then you can drag it if you wanted to make a node that had your amplifier power, your radio power, your rotor beam heading all in one group. You can do that. You can create a group. So under the W02X shack control, I can say I want to create a group, and I would go plus group. And so what do I do?
Group 9. It was a group 9 at the end.
Yeah. Okay. So group 9, I could just drag him up. Let's say I want to put him at the top. And now I want to sit there and I want to customize this and make this. And if you notice, when I expanded it, there's nothing in it. I can sit there and say, okay, I want to take, for example, the SWR from my amplifier. I want to take from the Antenna Genius. I want to be able to just take the radio 1, radio 2. That's probably not a good one to play with. Under the Flex radio, I want to take, let's say, the TX status. And I want to take, let's say, the TX VFO. I want to put those in there in that order. I can hit deploy. And now I created a node group with those 3 items in it. So you can move things around between groups and arrange it in any order you want.
Can you also copy?
I don't know if you can copy. I have not tried to copy. You can probably create 2 icons and assign one to one group and one to another group. So I could take the band information from the amplifier. I could do a Control C, Control V, drop them in here.
That's the way I do it.
And now what you can do is you can assign this to say, okay, I want to go to, I want to take I'm going to put in the Flex radio in addition to the amplifier. And now it would come in Flex radio. I would have my band information in addition to having it in the KPA 1500. And it didn't show up. Why? Oh, there it is, band, 80 meters. So again, it may not be in the right order where I want it in the Flex Radio group, where I would then move it around. Let's say I want it on the top. And you'll see it's now on the top of the Flex Radio group. So this is where you can customize things to make it look the way you want. You can move things around. You can arrange it. You can group things whatever you want. If you don't want all of the information, you don't have to assign them to a group. If you're not using, let's say you're not using the forward power for whatever reason, I'm just taking that one as an example, you can double click a node and you can click the enable in the bottom left and set it to disable. And now it will not show up on the dashboard. So my forward power is not there. So, again, and you see when you go to forward power, you get dotted lines around it, it's grayed out. To re-enable it, you just hit, the disable back to enable and hit deploy. So this is where you can move things around and play with it. And then what you could do under the tabs and links is, Alan likes this, you go to the layout, and this kind of gives you a kind of an idea of the layout of what you have. And you could, within the group, you can move things around.
I obviously missed that.
I think you buried the lead on that one, Dave.
Huh?
I think you buried the lead on that. That's probably the best interface I've seen for it. So.
Yeah.
How did you get there again?
Anyway, so
How did you get there again?
Over here under the group, under shack control, I hovered over it with my mouse and I select layout. And that brings this up. And you can just move things around.
How come I can't see it?
Now, one thing I want to point out is in some of these groups that I've created is the size. Like, in other words, when I go into KPA 1500, if I hit edit, it's a width of 6. So when I go back into that layout, if I cancel out of this, where am I going? Back in here.
You know what? That's not in my version.
You might have to update your node red. So KPA
do.
1500, if you look at these little individual blocks, I'm 6 blocks wide. So the group itself I set to width of 6. If you notice the width up there next to it, this would be the width.
Oh my God, that's so much easier.
Right? So that's where you set your width.
Right.
Now, if you notice though, my op standby in and my op standby out, right? One of them is that little thumbs up, thumbs down, and then the other one is operate standby, the actual text. So the op standby in is the thumbs up, thumbs down switch that I used. And then the op standby out is actually text, and it says text here. So that's the text that comes out, says either operate or standby. So what I did to get them side by side is I made them a width of 3 each. So if you notice, they're both, the group is 6 wide, but those are 3 wide each. And so that's how I was able to arrange them to have it show up with the op standby, thumbs up, thumbs down. That's one half of it. And then the operate standby is the other half of it. So this is, when you start getting really into the customizing of it. And then you'll notice here, like under Flex Radio, you notice those blank lines. And that's the other thing to point out is under the group, Flex Radio, if you notice I have spacers. And if I look at the spacer and it says 6 by 1, if I edit it, and I click on 6 by 1, that's the size of the spacer right here. So you can add spacers, and what the spacer will do is it allows you to place those spacers so you get a delineation between the Vita 49 information coming in and then the radio information. So you can add spacers, and the other thing you can do with the spacers is you can add the spacers so you can keep your groups at the same height, the total height of the group. And I'll just show you this real quick. So I should have had this queued up ahead of time. Sorry about that. But I'm going to look at pictures and then screenshots. And I got a lot of screenshots. But anyway, down at the bottom, when you have your dashboard, this would be, the left half of it is my second monitor, but the right half is my main monitor. And that's my Node-RED dashboard up on top, the black. And so what I've done is I've used spacers in there in the different groups, and I've arranged things with spacers and with the sizing of the width of them, and also you know, of the height of how many things are in there. And I was able to arrange it to get this layout that everything is symmetrical. Everything is laid out, you know, all symmetrical and perfect. And so using the spacers, you can sit there and get things sized where everything is the same size. Any questions on that so far? Yeah, again, the best thing to do is load the flows, get it working. Once you have it working, you can make a backup of the SD card, or as I said, there's an option in the latest Node-RED that you can enable projects, and you can clone your working project into another project that you can experiment and play with and start, you know, moving things around. And if you make a mistake, you blow it away and you clone the main project again and start again. Or, you know, so this way you're not, you know, changing anything on your live dashboard.
How do you enable projects?
So, Alan, anything you want to inject on projects? I know you do.
Well, I want to have two comments for Mike, who's not updated. He's still operating on version 1, it sounds like. And he also asked, how do you get the projects feature? You have to update, Mike. If you get the latest version, you'll have the projects. And then how do you update? Just rerun the install script.
The script, yeah.
You know, the one you got off of the nodered.org website.
Yeah.
Just rerun that script and it will update everything for you.
Yeah, in the wiki, there's a link to the command, the bash command to load Node-RED. Just run that bash command from the command line to the Pi.
I got it.
Just remember, you have to have Git loaded on the machine too.
And then the projects.
Or projects won't work.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
Okay.
You're right, Bob. But we only ran into that problem with your Windows machine. I think it automatically installed it on the Raspberry Pis, the Git. And then let's see, Mike, to get to the best thing for the projects for you to look at, just Google Node-RED projects. And the guy from Scotland made a really nice, you know, the developer made a really nice short video of projects, and that'll get you up to speed in about 10 minutes.
All right. Anyway, continuing on, couple of things to cover here as we're getting into customization of the dashboard and stuff, and Node-RED in general. Under Site, the Node-RED dashboard, you know, doesn't even really show up here, but you can set the name of it if you want. You can show the title bar, not show the title bar. The side menu, I have it set to click to show side menu. What that means is that little icon here. I have to click it in order to see the different pages. You can set it to always show it or always shows icons only. So I have it set to click. I have it as no swipe between tabs. You can enable that if you're going to be using a tablet or something, and then you can just swipe between the different pages instead of clicking the icon to select a page. And the different themes, I recommend for beginners just use the Node-RED theme everywhere, which is the default. Date and time format. So if you you know, it's using date, month, and year. If you have any nodes that are using date and time, that would be the format it's using. The maximum horizontal vertical widget size, and the widget is again, when you go in these groups and stuff, those are widgets. So the maximum size of the page is 48 by 48. The default spacing is 6 by 6. And you can change those. To change those back in the layout, if I go into a group, I can go into edit. I can click here and I can tell it how big of a group do I want to make. 6 by, right now there's nothing in the group, so I can't change the vertical spacing, but I can make it up to however wide I want to go. I can, you know, go wider than 20 if I want. The little right here, if I hover over that, pull this way, and go over here, you could just sit there and make this as wide as you want to go, all the way up to 48.
I might add the spacing of 6 works perfect on an iPhone in terms of the width of the iPhone.
Yeah, when I showed you what it looked like on my iPhone with Node-RED, it comes up and the spacing's very good. And what happens now is because you can't see the whole width of this page, what's going to happen? Each of these groups will show up on the iPhone, let's say, and you just scroll up and down, and you'll see each group one right under the other as you go up and down and scroll up and down on the iPhone or an Android phone. That's smartphone. Tablets will show you a little bit wider view, but it's not going to show you the whole page. So again, that you can just scroll up and down and see all the different groups. So you can format this. If you're using a tablet, you want to lay it out so that on a tablet it formats the way you want it to see. If you're using primarily using a smartphone, you can lay it out with a width of 6 and then lay the groups out in the order that you would want them to be as you scroll down. You just use your finger and swipe your finger up, swipe your finger down, and scroll up and down on the phone or the tablet. And then on the computer again, 48 wide by 48 is pretty much the whole page. And then again under site here, what we want to under site, again, widget spacing, the group padding, and then the group spacing. So when you get into themes, it's pretty cool. You can sit there and create different colors and stuff. You have the light, which is the default that everybody gets when they first install it. Dark is like a gray and kind of a green color. And then I use the custom. And then with the custom, you can sit there and change your different colors. So if you notice my W02X shack control, I use purple for that. And then if you notice the page background and the sidebar background, group background and the widget background, I set them all to black. And I did that, and then it comes up with this layout that you see. And actually, if you've seen that picture that I brought up, where was it? You get something like this with the layout. You get very thin gray lines around each group, and then it gives it a nice look on the screen. What you're seeing here with the azimuth map, that's part of the rotor control. Tormod over in Norway wrote that, and we've kind of been using it, and it really is pretty. So I'll load that import real quick. I'll show you that one because that is really, really nice. I've adapted a flow that was Andreas, N6NU. I took his rotor control, and then what I did is I added Tormods to it. And what I have is a tab called rotor here. And this is the rotor, the upper part is the basic rotor control. I have pre-programmed buttons for beam headings where it'll read out and allow me to quickly hit 50, 120, 165, and so on and so forth. The bottom is what is actually that map that you see. And this, where'd we go? I wound up someplace, but no, it's missing. It's probably off the screen right now, but when I had, as you've seen with the picture, what you get is you get the manual and track buttons up on top where it says beam. This is interfacing the PST rotator azimuth, which is a very good program. And so this is made, you just go into PST azimuth rotator, and what you do is you enable UDP server, and then under the UDP setup, you just set up the IP address of the Raspberry Pi. So if I bring up PST rotator as, under setup here, you go UDP control, you check that, and then under here, under UDP control setup, you use a default port of 12,000 and just set the IP address for your Raspberry Pi, or if you're using Windows, it would be Windows. But the Node-RED server, that's the IP address of the Node-RED server. So that's all you got to set up in PST rotator as, and then that will be talking to it. And track will track the antenna. So it'll put the PST rotator as into tracking mode. I have it set up with N3FJP logger. So when it gets a call sign entered into the call sign lookup window, it automatically selects and tracks the antenna towards that call sign. If I hit manual, it will not do the auto tracking. And then you also have the pre-programmed buttons for, having the rotor go to that pre-programmed direction. So it's pretty cool flow. And I'm, going to make sure that that's uploaded as well, the latest version of that. So getting back to the dashboard, because it's running way past our hour. And but this is where you can customize colors on the dashboard. And again, under the dashboard itself, under the layout is where you would be able to create the groups and then move the items between the groups. And then if you were to create a new flow, if you're building a brand new flow and you were dragging in, let's say, a text node, you would have to take that text node and you'd have to go in and manually assign it to one of the groups. Or what you can do is you can hit the pencil and you can create a new group. You can hit the pencil here, and now you can go ahead and make a new, new dashboard here if you wanted to. Or you can go into here and, change it, add new UI tab. So this is where you do all your customizing of anything. And again, the best thing to do is load the flows, make a backup, and then start playing around. Just start playing, and you'll be surprised at how quickly you'll pick up on it. It's pretty intuitive. I've learned a lot. I'm not a programmer by trade, and I've learned a lot by just Google search. If I couldn't figure out how to do something, I would Google Node-RED, parse, whatever, if I needed to learn something. So a lot of what I've done is, just going and doing Google searches and finding it online. Like in the rotor flow, this is the command that gets sent to PST as the program, and that sets my rotor to fit. I send this command, which is just a regular text command, and that goes out to the UDP, going out to PST azimuth rotor, and it just sends that command, the text command, and it tells it to go to 50 degrees. Any questions so far? I'm sure there's 100 questions, but again, really what I wanted to do is just get it to the point where you guys could load the nodes that you need, load the flows, and be able to at least be, know where to go to lay out your dashboard. So again, in order to get to the dashboard layout, it's the down arrow over here in the far right, and you select dashboard. And then under layout is where you have your main page. And then under the main page, you have your different groups that you create, and you load everything.
You have two questions on the chat. Do you want me to read it to you?
Yeah, go
ahead. Dave, November 2, Oscar Alpha is asking, how do you package this up so that when complete, you just start a dashboard which spawns all of your flows?
All right. And the second question about the ICOM radios, I do not have anything for ICOM. Once this is all built, if you wanted to make a backup of it, it's very simple. I'm just going to hit deploy on this, the deploy. Let's say this is what I built. I'm happy with everything the way it works. You can export individual. When you go to export here, come on.
I do not have.
Yes, it just locked up on me.
While you're doing
that. Oh, here it is. I'll cancel. When you go here and you go export, you can export, it's thinking about it because it's sitting there. We've been really playing with the Pi today, so I'm sure it's a little ticked off right now. So there it is. Now I could do selected nodes. In other words, if I had selected 3 nodes on a flow, I could export those nodes by themselves. I can export the current flow, which is my rotor flow, or I can say all flows. So if you want to do a backup, the all flows, I'm going to hit cancel at it. You can hit download, and it will download it as a file, or it'll bring it up in Notepad, depending on your computer. But here I would just do a file and I would do a save as, and it's always a JSON file. So you could go and name it, instead of flows.json, name it all flows.json. And that will back up all of your work. So if you ever have to build a new Raspberry Pi, you load Node-RED and then you import that all flows.json, and then all these tabs up on top will get imported with everything that's set up in them. Again, you may need to go into Manage Pallet and load in the necessary nodes that you need. So you'd have to go into Manage Pallet and go and install those nodes. But when you import a flow, it will come up with an error if it's missing a node, and you just have to go and go to Manage Pallet, go to Install, put in that name of that node, and hit Enter. And now we've already imported string, but you would find what you would want, and then click the Install button, and then that would import that missing node. The other thing is, once you're done, if you want to make a backup of everything and not have to go through the steps of following the wiki or something to reinstall everything from scratch, you could take the SD card out of the Raspberry Pi, put it in your adapter on your computer, and run a program like Win32 Disk Imager, and just make a backup image of that disk, of that micro SD card, and then you could just load that micro SD card image on another micro SD card and tuck that one away for safekeeping. And then you could just sit there and always have a good working backup, good backup of it too.
What if it's 100 miles away?
Was that, Mike? You're low.
Oh, what if it's 100 miles away?
Then you have to have snow boots and ski shoes on.
I think you can copy the .node-red directory, right? So, which is hidden,
yeah,
so you have to go look for it.
Yeah, there's ways to do it. Again, if the Pi is still running, you can actually get in through the command line. Node-RED is a hidden directory on the Pi when it installs, and you can get in there and get into the flows folder and be able to manually drag those flows into the folder and do it that way as well.
If I could add, Mike, for the Pi 4s now and the latest build of the Raspberry, Raspbian, from the Raspberry desktop, you can burn an image of the operating system to a USB drive or a thumb drive, and that can be your backup. And you can do that. Let's use, how many kilometers would that be? 110 kilometers away.
It's a 3.5-hour round trip.
Down the 415.
You could boot off of a solid state drive, a SATA drive now on Pi 4s now. So yeah.
That's
I
right.
have a Windows PC. I'd like to get it on a different spindle. So what I'll do.
It'll create a bootable backup.
Yeah. If you have a PC at the site, Mike, you can do Node-RED on the PC also under Windows 10. It may run under 7. I don't know.
No, that PC's the operator console for consoling and
right. What I would suggest is picking up another Pi and just have another Pi just loaded up with Raspberry OS on the network.
No, I'll just do some sort of version of FTP, a crossover to another place on a cron job. So
yep.
I just forget, to do what I normally do is, like you said, I'll do an export all flows. It downloads as, what is it, .json on my PC here. So, and I've had to do this once. If the machine freezes or totally, the file system goes read-only, then I can burn the whole new card here.
Right.
Dump it on it, go up there, get it, make sure I can talk to it, then I come home and finish it where it's warm, because right now there's a foot of snow up there.
All right. Good question now.
When I do gauges, I have to make sure they go well below 0.
Mm-hmm. I know this has been a long session here. Any other questions?
Yes, Dave, can you actually hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't sure on this microphone. Yeah, I guess what I was trying to get at is there a way to package this up more as a web page or app rather than, like, I built all my flows, I've got everything the way I want it. Do I have to import all the flows and then I can go to the dashboard?
No. Well, let me back up. Once you have this all done, you boot up the Raspberry Pi. The Raspberry Pi boots up, and you go from any web browser. You just type in the IP address of the Pi, 1880, if I could type correctly, /UI. And there's the dashboard. So all you got to do is, again, and this isn't arranged the way I wanted it, so I'd have to go back and rearrange things. We were just, playing around tonight. But all you do is once you're done, once you boot up that Pi could be sitting on the network, and all you do is you just turn it on and it's on the network. It could be connected either through Wi-Fi or Ethernet on your network. And from any web browser, whether it's a smartphone, tablet, PC, Mac, Linux, any web browser, you just type in the IP address of the Pi, :1880/UI, and there's your dashboard. So that's how it's packaged up. It actually becomes a web server. In essence, Node-RED has a built-in web server for the dashboard.
This doesn't have to be a Pi, right? This can be any operating
This is actually what you're looking at right now. This is my PC desktop. This is not the Pi. All the editing that I did and the dashboard itself is on my PC, not on the Pi. The Pi is sitting underneath the desk, actually, out of the way.
Why do you use a Pi? Is it somehow of an advantage to use a Raspberry Pi for something?
The latest Raspberry OS, what it does is it when it boots up, it moves the operating image into RAM or into another section of the Pi, and it maintains that original programming on the SD card protected. So in read-only mode. So it reads that information from the SD card, puts it into another area, on the Pi, on the SD card, like a temporary area. So if it loses power and you have to turn it off, turn it on, it doesn't corrupt. So they've done that on the latest Raspberry OS. And
I guess no worries about Windows updates or anything.
I mean, yeah, you're really using it as a dedicated. You're using it as a dedicated computer. So if you, especially if you have a case where you want to be able to turn something on and off, and you don't want you don't want to have to go boot up the Windows machine, because then, well, that kind of defeats the purpose of being able to go from if you're 100 miles away, or if you were just on a tablet sitting in your living room or on your iPhone, you want to do something, what if the Windows machine isn't booted up or something like that? So it just makes it where it's a simple little low power device that can do that.
And the other thing that is an advantage to running on a Pi versus a PC is, let's say you go ahead and they sell these little hat boards, and anybody who's played with one of these little DMR hotspots, the little RF modem that plugs into the Pi is called a hat, and it plugs into the GPIO pins on the Pi. So they actually sell a little relay board. Mike did a presentation on that a few weeks ago, where just take that little relay board that plugs directly onto the Pi, and now you can have relays to do the remote on and off on the Flex, and do the remote PTT if you need it for registering or deregistering SmartLink. So it's all self-contained in one little Pi, and you're not having a PC online with the being at the mercy of Microsoft and their updates.
I could put a plug in for the Windows guys. I don't want them to feel real bad. I've helped a couple guys with their Windows install. And one advantage of the Windows is that the COM ports are a lot easier to deal with. You just go to your device manager and there's your COM port connection. Where, of course, when you get into the Pi or even on the Mac, you got to do more of it at the command line level. And they just felt more comfortable doing it, on the desktop.
When you plug the USB cables, USB to serial cables in a Pi, you have to go ahead and do a little bit of legwork in order to know what the name of that device is. So, for example, if I go back into here and go into here, and we go back to our serial node, for example.
Tomorrow.
So like here, when you go into here, you have to know that address, dev TTY USB 0, USB 1, or whatever that connection is. You have to know the name of that connection, and then you have to set, obviously set the baud rate, which is not a problem, but you need to know that name. And there are ways from the command line in the Pi to retrieve that information when you plug the cable in. But without having that correct name of that path to the device, it won't work. So it's a little bit of legwork when you do a serial device directly to the Pi. The good thing about it is it's dedicated. It's dedicated to that purpose. You're not doing multitasking on it. And then if Windows pumps an update out that just all of a sudden decides that it's going to scramble your COM ports, you're not in trouble. So once it's set up, it pretty much keeps running. And as I said, with the Pi, with the latest operating system, it pretty much stores it in a read-only memory. And then as it boots up, it moves it into a temporary memory where it operates from. And then if something happens, it's not going to get trashed.
Dave?
Yes.
This is W9FLA.
Yes.
First of all, it's been an excellent presentation, but I'm still curious, what versions of SSDR can you do this with?
This is 2.62 or newer. I did not do this for 2.4.10. You can make it work for 2.4.10, but under the Flex Radio Flow, this client, where it gets the client ID does not exist in 2.4.10. It doesn't mean it can't be done. It's just it doesn't exist. So you don't need a lot of this stuff that's in here in the Vita 49 flow, where I've gone ahead and figured out, okay, what is the software version or what is the model number? All of this stuff in 2.4.10, pretty much, you don't need all that math in there to figure things out, what you're running. So it's really designed for 2.6.2 or newer. So 2.6.2, if there's going to be, and again, the caveat is that I don't know. I'm an alpha tester for Flex, but we don't know until they're ready to release something. So I do not know if there's going to be another 2.x release. I do not know.
I'll put a plug in here. If you want to do multiplex, and I'm going to put it, and this will probably be a future training session from Dave, but Mark at FRStack has done an excellent job of doing the coding for operating multiplex. And he's got a version of his software that operates on the Pi. And you can interface that with Node-RED. And it works very, very well with, multiplex situation with multiple clients.
Oh no, it's deleting everything. But yeah, the other thing with multiflex you can do is you can sit there and again, the Flex Radio flow right now is picking up information from the Vita 49 flow and then I'm going to modify it to pick up the IP address automatically, under the recommendation there. And so you can actually set up two Flex Radio flows, one with the IP address of radio A and the other one with the IP address of radio B. And then when you set the UDP port, you'd have to have unique UDP ports for each flow. So one would be 4996, the next one would be 4997. So you could do that, and then you'd have two windows with Flex Radio information, and it would show the name of the radio. So you'd have 6600M and 6700, let's say. So you can actually do it that way, or as Alan said, you could do it in FRStack as well. There's a reason I'm deleting everything here. So,
by the way, because I was blindly listening to you, I blew away my entire JSON file and had nothing. And it was a good thing I hit the export all to my desktop about a nanosecond before, because this is one of the beauties. The recovery was straightforward. I just re-imported it. I'm right back where I was. All right, so you say there's an auto backup palette, or is just using Git?
No, if there's an auto backup to the SD card.
Got it. That's good. That would have helped
in the
me.
Raspberry operating system now.
Oh, okay. I'll find it.
And I'm back to my original setup. See, what I did now is I deleted all those flows that we were playing with. And then I imported that all flows .json. Remember I said you can just back up all the flows and save it as all flows? That's exactly what I did. I started with a clean slate and imported all flows, and I'm back to my normal dashboard again. So I just pretty much started with no flows installed, and just I'll show you that, no flows installed, and then I just went into import, and I selected the file, and I selected the one that here that says all flows with today's date, and I just imported that and then hit deploy, and that's what I got now. So now if I hit 50, you'll see what will happen is on the map, the red is the target and the green is the actual. So as the rotor moves, the green will go up to where the red is at. So that was an example of restoring pretty quickly because I had backed up everything before we started.
Dave, before we it gets past the witching hour, is this something, and I usually talk to people, but I'm going to just throw it out there, but is this something maybe we should think of doing once a month and people could bring their homework?
I think it's a good idea that we do this more often. What I would like to see is the people that are new to Node-RED start loading the flows, playing with it, just start dabbling, click on the nodes and see what is see what's in each node. If it's a function node, try to figure out and follow along with the math that it's doing or what it's doing to the payload. And so for example, we'll wrap it up with this, for example. So for here under here, when the meter data comes in on 4996, now again I'm seeing input voltage, PA volts, fan speed, and PA temperature. So first thing I'm doing is I got it. It comes in and it says, okay, I want to go ahead and I want to slice and I want to get rid of the first 28 characters of the payload, from 0 through 27. The meat and potatoes, if you look at the Vita 49 meter packet, the first 28 characters is like header information and information that's really not pertinent to what you want. You really want to know what is the meter number and what is the value for that meter number? What is the actual payload? So what I did is I stripped off, and again, this is, for some people might be a little bit over their head right now. I strip off that beginning of it. So I'm starting with the beginning, with the first, and the meters come in order. So the first meter that comes in is the PA voltage, voltage at the PA. So the bits 0 and 1 is the meter number. I don't care about the meter number. I know that the first meter that I'm subscribing to is the PA voltage meter because I'm telling it up in here is where I'm telling it what meter do I want to subscribe to right here. So on a 6600, I'm saying I want to subscribe to the PA voltage meter, the voltage in meter, the fan meter, and the temperature meter. So I'm subscribing to those 4 meters. I'm sending the commands to the radio. I want the information for those 4 meters. So I strip off the beginning part of it that is not of any use to me. And then the first 2 bits, 0 and 1, is the meter number, which I don't care about because I know the first meter is going to be the PA voltage. So I set a variable voltage PA1 to the second bit, or bit 2, and then bit 3. And then over here is where you do the math. So the voltage PA equals voltage PA1 times 256 plus voltage PA2, and then that complete total is divided by 260. There's a scaling factor on meters. Depending on the type of meter, there's different scaling. And again, this is something that's it's in a document that I found in the Flex TCP wiki, and it's buried. The math is done for you already. So and then it takes that and it says I want to make it a floating number, a number with with decimal places with 1 decimal place. So and then that's what it does. So voltage PA, I say and that's what it is. And I feed that out to right here, this linear scale. So minimum 0, maximum 17. If it's 0 to 12.5 volts, it shows up yellow. 12.5 to 16 is green, and 16 to 17 volts is red. So anything over 16 volts, I get red. And so that's, pretty much it. This here, this 0 meters after disconnect, this is something that I added. I don't know if I have it installed in here. No, I did not. Let me bring it up over here. So, and again, I'm going to wrap it up with this, but just real quick, I'll connect with my radio and I'll hit run. And what
your meter flow, by the way, on the website.
What was that?
I don't see your meter file on the download area.
Yeah, I'm gonna be the meters is part of the Flex Radio flow. I just put it in a separate group. So now the client connected, and I don't know why the input voltage should adjust in a minute, and the PA temperature should adjust, unless I screwed something up. I probably screwed something up along the way. I probably messed something up when I was backing things up and things. So, yeah, because the PA voltage should not be that high. So I have something wrong. But anyway, so ignore the meters for now. I got to figure out where I broke something. But the bottom line is, when I turn on the client, it fills in the client name, which is the front panel of the radio, Flex 6600M, the IP address of the front panel of the radio, which is different than the radio IP, my transmit VFO, the mode, tune power, RF power, and then it's ready, meaning it's in receive. And if I hit MOX, it goes to transmitting. Then when I disconnect the client, the way I have this written is pretty cool in that I disconnect the client, and what will happen is you'll see that that information for the client all goes and it clears out, and the meters get zeroed out. That was what I did over here with the 0 meters after disconnect. So when it sees the client, the name of the client ID go away, it zeroes out those meters. So the meters don't give you a false reading. So when you see the meters at 0, it means that your client, Smart SDR or the front panel of the radio or the iPad or the Maestro, that it's not connected to the radio. When the radio gets turned off, what will happen is when the radio shuts down, the radio, when we set up that ping node here under the VITA 49, this node here, it's pinging the radio every 10 seconds. And then when it fails to ping the radio after the radio shuts down, it clears that out as well. So this gives me a quick indication, is the radio powered up? And do I have a client connected? Just by looking at that and seeing if those fields are populated. So it's just something that I added to it. Any questions? I know it's been a long night, and I appreciate everybody coming in here, and I hope this was beneficial to you guys. All right, so we're going to wrap it up, and maybe what we'll do is we'll do another presentation at a little bit later date, and try to go into a little bit more detail once everybody is playing around with this. All right, so good night, everybody, and thanks.
Excellent stuff. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, David.
All right, take care.
Thank you. Well done.
Very good.